Welcome to another installment of the Digital Cinema Show, a series covering the art, science, and business of motion pictures. We begin this episode with an extensive interview with renowned cinematographer and president of the ASC, Kees Van Oostrum. Recorded as part of this year's DCS Lighting Expo, Kees shares his insights and experience regarding the benefits and pitfalls of using LEDs for motion picture lighting.
And if you look at my lighting package today, I would estimate about 40 to 50% of is LED. And that was something I wanted, but it didn't come without a number of pitfalls.
Next, we visit with John Putch, one of the busiest directors in the business, with credits ranging from Blackish, Rush Hour, Scrubs, Cougar Town, My Name Is Earl, Ugly Betty, along with features from the Atlas Shrugged, Beethoven, and American Pie series, as well as a remake of the classic Poseidon Adventure. We were interested to find out more about his own set of indie features, which he has accomplished to much acclaim with very limited crews on shoestring budgets. John shares his interesting list of guiding principles.
Took Lars von Trier's Dogma 95 and I modified them for my own devices, but mainly it was just 8 crew, including me. And
Can never be more than 8.
Can never be more than 8. You can't have more than 4 lights.
No more than 4 lights.
Any equipment that you bring must fit into your SUV or one minivan. And if the DP wants to bring lights and stands and scrims and high rollers and all that stuff, he has to carry them.
We complete this episode with an interview from our last aerial cinematography symposium. Acclaimed aerial director DP David Nowell, ASC, gives us a short history of aerial cinematography, as well as what he sees for the future. He also draws a comparison between the use of drones and traditional manned camera operation with helicopters.
It still needs to really be a 3-man team, and it needs to be the pilot, just like it would be with a helicopter, your cameraman to operate the gimbal and stuff, but you really need that, what we're calling the visual observer, but we normally work with the ground coordinator.
Continue watching to view the entire episode or use any of the separate links to jump ahead to segments that may be of particular interest to you. In either case, thank you for joining us and watching the Digital Cinema Show. We welcome your input, so please follow us on Vimeo, YouTube, or Facebook. If you would like to support our efforts, please consider also joining the Digital Cinema Society. Membership is available to anyone, whether you can afford it or not. It's always free to students, and we suggest a $30 annual contribution from those who can afford it, or a lifetime membership at $100. This episode is made possible by the generous support of OWC Digital, storage technology designed to meet the growing needs of today's production and post professionals, with products like the Thunder Bay 4 RAID 5 solution. In this segment of the Digital Cinema Show, we hear from renowned cinematographer Kees Van Oostrum, ASC. Kees's notable credits include Gettysburg and Gods and Generals. He's been nominated for multiple ASC and Emmy Awards for programs such as the miniseries Return to Lonesome Dove. He is currently shooting and sometimes directing the freeform series The Fosters, as well as serving as the president of the ASC. So Kees, let me ask you, how is the new technology, the new lighting technology, changing the way you work?
Well, quite dramatically. I was very happy when I came in the room here that we were talking about LEDs, because that's exactly what I would like to talk about, the pros and the cons of them. I think in the last 4 years, I've gone heavily into that direction. And if you look at my lighting package today, I would estimate about 40 to 50% of is LED. And that was something I wanted, but it didn't come without a number of pitfalls. And still today, there are a number of pitfalls with LED lights that I would like to discuss here today. But just to give you an example from a practical point of view, I don't carry any jokers anymore. Basically, everything up to a 1.6 HMI, 1.8 HMI is LED on my set. Daylight, it's just something that I prefer because it's a lighter unit, it has no heat, and also because, I would say about 80% of what we do is soft light. If you take a Fresnel light, like a small HMI, you end up diffusing it, you end up bouncing it, and it becomes a rather big unit. While if you go to the LED units, the various ones that are around, you have a very soft light and a very small package, and they're quite powerful. Not that I endorse these units necessarily, because there's many manufacturers, but just to give you an idea, what I work with is light panels, now Astras, high-lows, which are their more output lights, higher output lights, and I use airy sky panels. I use celebs. That's sort of my package these days, and I use them frequently. Now, one of the problems I've had over the years, and it's getting better, but you still have to be very aware of it, is that LEDs are not the same light source as a tungsten light, not even as an HMI, although they're closer to the HMI family than they are to tungsten, because it's not really a full spectrum lamp. And I know that the manufacturers have been working really, really hard to give us a light that actually matches a full spectrum light like a tungsten light. They're not always perfect, and where they're not perfect is that you can stand there and you can say this is a CRI of 91 or 93 or 95. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that appears in front of that light comes out in the same color. And especially if you have multiple color faces in the shot, you certainly realize that one turns out quite a bit greener than the other or quite a bit more magenta. It's always in the green and the magenta area that you start seeing the shortcomings of what I call the shortcomings of the LED in general.
Yeah, I think if a light's there that you don't want, you might be able to filter it, but if it doesn't,
No,
if
you
the
can't.
frequency's not there, then you can never create
Filters,
it. That's the worst part.
That's the thing. A filter doesn't help it. Once that particular frequency is missing, and it just happens. I mean, you don't really notice it so much on objects like colorful objects or general objects, but faces, which is obviously what we shoot a lot of the time, are surprisingly susceptible to these issues with LEDs. So. If you start using LEDs, unless you're using one type exclusively and you're happy to lose some of the coloring and all that stuff, you might be okay. But if you start using them in conjunction with tungsten light, which we do, of course, because not everything is LED, then you have to be really aware of what's going on. And you'll run into issues. I mean, even a light like a sky panel, which is tremendously corrected, and we use them with great success, and they're probably one of the better lamps out there. Still, I've been working with them now for about 6 months, and you see certain things happen out of the blue where you go like, wow, that color is quite different on that face. So be aware of that. Of course, the advantages of the lights will make us work with them, and they'll get better and better, and people are working on some of these issues. But that's just one advice from the floor here.
Well, is there a traditional light that you will never give up? What's your favorite light?
Well, my favorite light is a 650 airy tungsten light. It's just so much light in today's world. You can use it direct, you can bounce with it, and I have quite a few of those. They sort of have replaced everything in my tungsten package. I think I'll probably carry about 12 or 14 of those. And I might just only have 2Ks, for whenever I need it. It's very rare because these lights are great and they're easy to work with and they're small. Because it felt to me if you grab a small tungsten light, they have more output and they're easy to work with. But because we now are starting to fall into a particular mode with these sky panels that are so popular, the popularity of the L5, the L7, and the E10 has come back in, because now you can exclusively go LED, which solves some of these issues of matching.
So you're mostly sticking with tungsten? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, in the stage you do tungsten, and then
yep.
I mean, I would say that outside the stage it's about 90% blue HMI or blue LEDs. But in the stage you use tungsten, and that's where most of my problems are actually with the LEDs in the tungsten array. Yeah.
So the LED is replacing your medium-size HMIs.
Well, it's replacing soft light, which is bounces, and bounces are always problematic because they take up so much space. I mean, by the time if you take a Fresnel light, you bounce it in a card and you throw it to another piece of diffusion, you take up about 3 to 4 feet of real estate. And, that is always being combated by either Kino flows or now the LEDs, which are a much smaller package.
Now you're famous for doing these big epic scenes. You're not really seeing the place for the LEDs yet on that. You're still using your big units. Yeah, although, because, space light is 6 kilowatts normally. And now you're only running maybe, 10 amps to it, and where it saves the most is in cabling and and all the rigging and all that stuff. Yeah. So and this one's bicolor, and we've got it dimmed down about half, 50%.
Yeah, so I mean, I think LED is coming fast down the road. I mean, I do work in Europe occasionally on commercials, and I just came back, and for instance, in Belgium, they are now asking film productions to give them a green sheet of health, which means if you go out with a film crew and you carry a couple of maxi brutes, you won't get a certain amount of money because it takes up too much power. So that's as far as it's going to go. So I think that tungsten bulbs and tungsten lights are going to get extinct because, you know, all the forces are against. I mean, we're only a small part of that market. They also told me that a 2K globe right now, I don't know what it was, but it's quadrupled in 2 years' time. So the prices are going to go up and up and up on these tungsten units. So I think there's going to be a process where in 10 years from now we see very, very little of it anymore.
And the LEDs are going to get less expensive and better all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the new world where we need to go into, you know. We can't just expect these tungsten lights to be around much longer in that sense.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Kees was one of our very early Digital Cinema Society members and supporters, and we appreciate it. He's also been very much into training from the early days. He set up the master classes. I think first it was with Cinematographer Expo, working through them, and now you've been working with the ASC in training. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be here and give back to the community. Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah.
So lucky to have a dear old friend of mine here with us today, John Putch. John is one of the busiest episodic comedy TV directors in the business. Recently been doing Blackish, Rush Hour, Scrubs, Cougar Town, My Name Is Earl, Ugly Betty, etc., etc. John also has directed a wide variety of feature films, some episodes in the feature series Atlas Shrugged and Beethoven. What we want to talk about today is something that John says I think he does as therapy, and those are a whole set of features that he's done on a shoestring budget with a small crew, and he writes, directs, and brings his actor friends together, and he has a very interesting ethic for these, and then he takes these, goes the festival circuit and gets distribution. I want to find out all about that. But first, let's find out a little bit about your background. I'm not the only former child actor sitting in this shot.
We have that in common. Yes, I was a child actor at the age of 5. My parents had a summer theater, professional summer stock theater in South Central Pennsylvania. My father was the artistic director, and me and my mom and my sister all worked there. And I grew up on stage doing musicals and plays. And as I continued to get older, I bounced around the production staff, and I would run lights sometimes, or park cars, or do props, or whatever, and circled back and ended up, you know, acting, and all through my high school years and into college until my father passed and we got out of that theater. But that's how I started. And then when we moved to California, my mom was an actress and she got a job here. I started auditioning for TV shows here. And because of the theater training, I don't know, I was quite a fit for sitcoms because, I don't know, they were bigger. So I happened to do pretty well in the 70s and 80s on sitcoms, half-hour comedies. And all the while, I was still making movies.
Well, if we can say that I'm Beaver's brother, can we tell who your mother is?
I am Gene Stapleton's son.
And she was, of course, Edith
She
on
played-
All in the Family.
Right.
What a classic
little-known
character.
show called All in the Family. It did pretty well there. And I had a great childhood growing up watching her, not only as a TV actress, but we saw her do things in the theater that no one ever saw. The television audience never saw, and she was quite a great actress. And so yeah, I had a great training. Both my parents were ensemble-minded people. My mother was not interested in celebrity. She was only interested in characters that she played, and that has come with me in my work ethic. You know, first as an actor and now as a director, and I'm so glad because I can't tolerate Egos.
How did you work with me? All
I don't
those
know. I
years?
was going to say, my first television job ever was with you, and this man taught me so many things, so many things. And
Let's
that'll
hear
be a
about
different show.
Let's hear about your movies that you've been doing on your own. Valerie Flake, I guess, was the first.
Well, let me back up, because before I was evolved and enlightened about show business, I was chasing all the attention, and I spent a whole lot of money on making independent movies. I mortgaged my house. I used credit cards. I had honey wagons and full crews and makeup chairs and all that stuff, and it was expensive and got me nothing except what I learned from the experience. But as I kept directing in television and getting older and more wiser, I realized I need to be doing, more thoughtful things and not really care about how they're going to be perceived or feather in my cap or whatever. So when the digital revolution happened in like 2001 or before that even, and we started getting really good HD cameras that you could get your hands on, I started thinking Super 8 again in my head and started putting together these little micro budget movies and going back to those basics. And man, some of the best movies I've made have been these ones that no one's ever seen or heard of or cost $1, I mean, they all cost under $100,000, and some of them are, way below that, which everyone can do now. But for me, it was a big deal.
Now, you have an interesting set of guiding principles.
Yes.
Can you tell us about those?
Yes, I took Lars von Trier's Dogma 95 and I modified them for my own devices. But mainly it was just 8 crew, including me. And
Can never be more than 8.
can never
on
be
a
more
crew.
than 8. You can't have more than 4 lights.
No more than 4 lights.
Any equipment that you bring must fit into your SUV or one minivan. And if the DP wants to bring lights and stands and scrims and high rollers and all that stuff, he has to carry them. And he has to unpack them every day. And once you bring those rules out, it's great. Everything gets small. And what else? Other things. Actors have to do their own makeup and hair. I make a continuity book for wardrobe. I pick their clothes out. I take pictures of their outfits, and then I give them a booklet with pictures. This is what you wear in scene X, Y, Z, whatever. And it's worked like a charm, and they're responsible for bringing their own clothes. So the idea is just cutting down the amount of people. And it feels more like a friendly shoot with your friends than it does like a movie. And the other important thing is it should not feel like work. It should feel like play. And
Well, you're a
that
fun
means-
guy to be around. I know
Thank
that.
you, but that's the idea.
I couldn't afford to work on it myself.
No, you
but
couldn't.
You
No,
did
no.
ask me originally.
Oh yeah, and you can only bother people who have the means to take the time off or give you the commitment, or are just in between. But you cannot offer money, a lot of money. It's like gas money basically. It's literally, hey, it won't be hard on you, and if you want to have some fun, here's where you need to be. But there's never ever an obligation. And yes, it's true. You really have to be choosy with when you do it, so you might catch people when they're not working.
And you've had some success, but if there was a major success, you're sharing the wealth. You have a deal
Yes.
with profit sharing.
Yes, I split the profits. I mean, I did that early on, and when I didn't derive any profits, it just became pointless to promise that in exchange for working for free. So instead, I try to pay people now, and at least something, on par with what the actors make, which is very low, or some payment in disguised in the per diem world or the gas money world. But so it isn't just, it's not a freebie. There is something I can give.
So your flourishing directing career has allowed you to do
Yes.
these other movies that you
Yes.
really are passionate about.
Totally. And I don't crowdfund and I don't borrow from other people. And until that goes away, I'm going to continue using my own funds, because it just feels less fake to me.
Well, let's mention some of these movies and where people could find them. Like Mojave Phone Booth, was that the first one that was
Yes,
done?
the first one I set off to do was called Mojave Phone Booth, and interesting little drama shot with a Sony Z1U before there was even 24 frame video. It was crazy. And that's they're all up on Vimeo on demand HD. And then after that, I made a trilogy of comedies called Route 30.
Those are hilarious.
They're really fun, and I really got to perfect the digital rules thing that I came up with. And by the third one, we were cooking, and we were using better equipment with each film, and I got to add to my kit, like you have, and those were fun. Route30trilogy.com. And then I just finished in last summer a drama, which I shot back in my hometown at my father's old theater, and it's called The Father and the Bear, and it's in post now, and I have a world premiere in July at Stony Brook Film Festival. And that movie's really fun because I got to use actors that I grew up with working with at Totem Pole, who are just professional stage actors, and I had archival footage from when I was a kid there and my dad was a kid, and we shot a ton of Super 8 millimeter of all the plays, and then there's all this photo material archives, and I used them in connection with the lead actor who played the main character. I have more footage of this guy than you can imagine, and it's all him performing at the theater. So he plays an actor who used to perform at this theater and is now retired, and I use all this footage. And that's part of my one of my little rules and ideas is you have to look at what you have as a resource and then write a script around it. Don't just make something up and then figure out how to make it for 50 grand. Look around and see what you have at your disposal and then go, oh, I got this, nobody else has. I'm going to write a story around that. If your uncle owns the Ford dealership in town, guess where your main character is going to work, right? That's production value. So that's how it all came about, and it's gonna be really cool.
And tell us about your post-production. I know you do everything on your desktop.
Oh
at home,
yeah,
right?
I have a Mac Pro. I got my 2 big screens. I edit everything. I love editing. I used to edit on Final Cut 7, and then I switched 2 movies ago to the Premiere, the Creative Cloud, which I love. And yeah, between Premiere and Photoshop and a little bit of After Effects, I can do so much at home. And so I edit the film. I prepare all the tracks. I give all the I do all the sound, most of the sound design, and then I hand the OMFs off to my mixer, and he'll re-record it and make it sound better. And then he gives it all back to me, and I finish the movie right at home.
And then where do you go next? Tell us about the festival circuit, because you're one of the few people I know that's really been successful on the festival circuit.
Well, my success has been not being snobby about where I send it. And that's a huge thing that first-time filmmakers can never get past. I'm not in Sundance, I can't take it. Or I'm not in Seattle or Telluride. And, whatever, all those. Tribeca is the other buzzword. And I try to tell everybody, you're not going to get into those because you need to be connected in some way. It's like you might as well just be going to Warner Brothers and try to get your movie shown there. So what I do is I just flood every festival I can afford to go to. Or I throw a dart and go, I've always wanted to go to Michigan. I'm gonna submit to those festivals. And you just make it a fun way to show your movie and share it. And out of that, something might come. But I self-distribute now. I stopped using sales agents. So now I just want to get it out to as many festivals as possible, because believe it or not, the more websites you're on, film festival wise, the more hits you will have on Google, and you will raise the awareness of your film if you care. And then you can put it up for download or sell DVDs. But the Route 30 movies were great because since I shot them in hometown PA, and that's where I premiere most of my movies, is that theater. And I'll have an event with the cast there, make a speech, do a Q&A like a film festival, make a big party for everybody, and sell admissions. And it's done really well for those 3 movies. Has not made the the budget back ever, but it makes enough to cover the event and maybe a couple of plane tickets for people, and that's it. And I've learned after doing this for, I don't know, the last 10 years, it's really okay to just have it seen by 10,000 people in South Central Pennsylvania because they love it. And they buy DVDs and they talk about it, and they're proud of it. And no one out here knows anything about it, and no one in the in the global world of film distribution knows anything about it.
Well, maybe we can help change that.
But that's okay. I'm saying it's okay.
How do we get some extra eyeballs on your movies in case people that see this interview want to see some of the movies? They go to your website.
You go to putchfilms.com or route30trilogy.com, and there are links to all of, rent it, download it instantly. You can see it. I'm a big fan of Vimeo on demand. It's good for the filmmaker because they don't interfere with how you want to present it. They just act as a front door for you. I recommend it highly. So that's how you can see the films if you want.
And what's on the horizon for you?
On the horizon, I'm going to premiere Father and the Bear, finish posting it, and then hopefully I'll get a call to go to work, back to the coal mines in the fall on the television coal mines. But no one's called yet, so we'll see. Check back with me. Unemployed.
Join the club.
Unemployed, yes. Fun employed.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John.
Oh.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce an old friend, one of the top aerial DPs in the business, David Nowell, ASC. Well, you've worked on a lot of the big movies over the last few decades, Lord of the Rings, Hunger Games, Pirates that you mentioned. You've been at this a while. I think Apocalypse Now is on your resume.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing is, I do date myself on that. I was the assistant cameraman on that, but I did have the opportunity to do some of the work. Most of the stuff inside the Huey that you would see, they threw me in there with a Continental mount, and David Butler was in the other ship, and off we'd go and do some of the filming. So I had a bit of operating credit on that, but I was the assistant on that.
Well, you're very qualified, though, to tell us a little bit about the history of aerial cinematography.
How long do we have? It's funny because Rex Metz is here, and a longtime friend and associate, and he's actually the one that got me started in this industry. He was the first cameraman I ever worked with on a ground shoot, but because of Rex's background doing aerials with Tyler and everything, he introduced me to a company called Continental Camera Systems that started where the Home Depot is right now.
And we're talking about the Tyler mount, which was the thing, right?
Tyler was the thing at the time, and then Continental Camera was coming in 1972 to compete against that as another door-mounted, not gyro stabilized, but kind of a gimbal type of system. And Rex introduced me to the people there, worked with them from 1972 on, but that's what got me started in the industry. And at the time, they had one of these 48-inch, the 4-foot units sitting there that came out of Canada. And that was the first introduction for me to remote controls. Matter of fact, the old original desk and everything is in the lobby. I saw it there. But that was my first introduction to remote control and a joystick operated system.
So it went from tearing the door off of a Jet Ranger and hanging out the back with a Tyler mount or Continental mount to a sphere that's on the nose, probably?
Well, that one was mounted on the side. The only thing they could come up with was bracketry that would mount to the side of a helicopter, and we had Bell 47s and we had a Jet Ranger at the time. And they had a video version and they had a film version. This is 74, and I think the last one in 76 crashed, and gyro stuff went away for a long time, and it went back to nothing but Tyler and Continental mount. in the side door. And probably about, I guess, mid-'80s is when the gyrosphere first came into the United States. It had been in Norway. Ron Goodman, who later on started SpaceCam, had one of those systems, came into the States as gyrosphere, and that started about 1984, because they tried to use it for the '84 Olympics in Los Angeles. And that began, I think, most of the remote control kind of work, and they went to the 36-inch balls. And then Westcam came down with theirs in 1987, and I did one of the very first jobs with that. And then it's just, the momentum has picked up from there. It's become almost just nothing but the gyro-stabilized ball systems of some sort.
So you're sitting inside the
Yeah.
cockpit, and nice and comfortable.
Nice and comfortable.
Compared to
Let
having
me
your
tell you,
legs hanging out
Some
on
of
the
these
strap.
things I did in Valdez, Alaska, in the wintertime or something like that, and you've got everything on to try to stay warm with the door off and stuff, and now you're telling the guy to turn the heater down. It's getting hot in here, but it is the luxury of being inside the helicopter. The new ones now are so sophisticated, they're so nice, HD monitors, and now we're shooting with, Alexa Red. Everything that we see is HD, and the systems are so sophisticated on their stabilization and stuff. It's just a lot of fun to work with. But the thing is that I had that chance in 1974 to work with remote control, and that I translated into that world fairly easy. So I was just lucky to have had that background before all the gyro remote control stuff really caught on. And so now with the drones and everything, I'm working with the wireless thing. I'm not normally used to just hand holding it because it sits on the desk or sits on my lap and stuff, but it's still the same controls. So I've been lucky enough to kind of segue into
Pretty
the
easy
drone
to pick that
aspect
up
of
then.
it too, right? The main thing is the pilot, and it's always been. I'm sure Rex will agree with me that the pilots that we work with all these years, 40 some odd years now, they're the key to the shot. If the pilot can't get me into a position to get it, I don't care how good I am or my experience and stuff, if I can't get there, I can't get the shot. And these guys have been great, and that's who we work with most of the time, and that's what's happening now. These drone pilots are the guys that are going to be the key to this kind of work. When I first saw this stuff, I said, I've never seen drone work like this before, but it was the pilot. It's the key to it.
So it's a team approach. That's the name of your business is Team 5.
Well, yeah, Team 5 is a little business that we put together. Part of our division is that we recognize the fact that it's not going to just be the gyro-stabilized manned helicopter kind of work. It's got to encompass the drone aspect of it because it's the coming thing. But we wanted to make sure it was as professional as possible, and we were forced to because of the exemption, like Tom explained. There's all these guidelines. We have to follow that. We have the trained pilots. We have the trained operators and trained technicians and all that kind of stuff. And, we're just segueing into the bigger films as we have been doing, but with the drone stuff.
And it's all necessary. All the same functions need to be fulfilled, right?
It still needs to really be a three-man team, and it needs to be the pilot, just like it would be with a helicopter, your cameraman to operate the gimbal and stuff, but you really need that, what we're calling the visual observer, but we normally work with the ground coordinator, and he'll be the one on the radio next to the first AD. We may be up there flying through the streets, but just like we did on Insurgent recently, I mean, we blocked off 8 blocks in Chicago and the river and everything, and that's what you do to get the shot. But somebody's on the ground that's working with the AD that lets us know what's going on. You have to do the same exact thing with the drone. The only difference is you probably take off from the street and pick it up and do the same kind of shot, but you have to have the same people, and for safety, for everything. You're still blocking off. We had 100 PAs that were. We did it on the weekend, so most of the buildings are shut down, but you just have to do the same type of thing.
Now, just like I do on the ground in a narrative scene, I help the director block. And tell us about how you work with the director and how you design shots, sequences.
It depends. I mean, a lot of it now is being driven by visual effects. So a lot of that has been prevised. It's the director, this is what he wants. The visual effects guy says, this is what I have to have. And we're dictated to that a lot. I just got back from New Mexico. We're working on a new Tina Fey movie. They wanted to put her inside Huey's from Kirkland Air Force Base, and then they said, why don't you guys come in and do the aerials of it? And it was just, they're going up to do their stuff with coverage inside, and whatever the Air Force pilots were going to do, we dictated where they would fly for the background, supposed to look like Afghanistan, and we're on our own. And so we just have to make it up on the fly. And so it was an hour's worth of like, this looks good, that doesn't look good. Make it go from 1 to 2 type of thing. So some of it's very scripted, and some of it is based on exactly what the director wants, and then you tell him what he can get, and then you try to get what it is that he needs. You know how to do it yourself. And some of this is just, you get up there and it's all ad lib.
What do you see for the future of aerial cinematography? Where's it going?
You know, people ask that and they go, you know, you're still at it, and where's it going and stuff, and I'm going, it just keeps going. Because of all the shots that we used to do 15 years ago, I see the truck, I see this, move this, now it's like, I don't care what's there, they'll take it out digitally. I mean, it's like Michael Bay. Michael Bay on Bad Boys 2, I think it was. I said, Michael, I cannot get the insert car out of the shot because it's tracking the Ferrari that I have to track. And he goes, don't worry about it, I'll take it out later on. And I went, from now on, I'm never going to worry about what's in the shot. If they can take that out, and that's part of the thing. It's become easier from that it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. We can take it out. And as you've seen, so much has been changed now. But because it may have segued away from doing the real thing, it's gone so much into all the stuff with robots. I've been filming robots now for 10 years or so, never knowing what the shot is. You know, I'm just doing stuff and they add it in later on. But you still have to get the real element. Every visual effects guy will say, I need the real thing. If you're flying through real buildings or if you're flying over a real forest, it has to be the real thing. We'll add the other stuff in, but it just keeps going. It just hasn't stopped. So I think it's just going to keep going, and it's just going to be more added in with the drone stuff.
Well, thank you very much for sharing.
Absolutely. No, thank you.